When we talk about addictions, we often picture substances or destructive behaviors, alcohol, drugs, gambling, social media. But addiction isn't just a bad habit or an uncontrollable impulse. It's a symptom, a visible expression of something much deeper. Carl Jung, in his psychological approach, often viewed these repetitive patterns as manifestations of unresolved inner conflicts, echoing the repressed parts of our psyche. Addiction, in this sense, can be understood as a failed attempt to fill an existential void. Jung described the human psyche as a totality made up of different forces, both conscious and unconscious. When we ignore the messages of the unconscious or suppress aspects of ourselves, we create an internal dissonance. This conflict seeks resolution, and often we find in addiction a temporary solution, a palliative cure for deeper pains. Think of addiction as a spiritual substitute. Jung argued that many of our destructive impulses stem from the need for something greater, something transcendental. When this spiritual connection, whether to the divine, to nature, or to a higher purpose, is absent, we try to fill that void with immediate pleasures. That's why he said, no psychotherapist can deny that modern man's spiritual hunger is one of the greatest problems of our time. Here lies the paradox. While we try to numb ourselves, addictions end up confronting us with the very emptiness we seek to avoid. If we look closer, what does addiction reveal? Beneath the compulsive desire for control or escape, there is always a pain, a lack or a shadow waiting to be acknowledged. The shadow theory, central to Jungian psychology, is essential for understanding the deep link between us and our addictions. The shadow represents everything we reject about ourselves, fears, desires, traumas that ends up relegated to the unconscious. But these elements don't disappear. On the contrary, they gain strength and manifest in ways we often don't understand. When we deny the shadow, we become vulnerable to its influence. It emerges in compulsions, automatic behaviors, and the repetition of destructive patterns. If you're trapped in a cycle of addiction, it may be that you're dealing with an aspect of your shadow demanding attention. For example, workaholism might mask a deep fear of uselessness or a repressed need for validation. Compulsive substance use, on the other hand, might be a cry for emotional freedom or an attempt to escape a rigid, suffocating persona. The persona, by contrast, is the mask we present to the world, the social role we play to gain acceptance. When we over-identify with this mask, we sacrifice essential parts of who we are. This disconnection causes suffering, which we often try to ease through addictions. Addiction, in this sense, is a silent cry for authenticity, a bid to reconnect with the self that has been abandoned. Jung believed that to break this cycle, we must confront the shadow and integrate its contents. This doesn't mean accepting them as absolutes, but acknowledging them and giving them space to exist without letting them dominate our lives. True freedom begins when we stop fighting our inner demons and start understanding them. Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the journey to becoming a whole, authentic being, was the key to overcoming many of the conflicts we face, including addictions. This process involves integrating all parts of the psyche, the persona, the shadow, the animus or anima, and ultimately the connection to the self, the core of our being. Addictions often keep us trapped because they distract us from the real work of self-discovery. While we are caught up in compulsions, we don't have to confront the deeper questions that terrify us. Who am I, really? What are my fears? What is my purpose? Yet the path of individuation demands precisely this, facing these questions and embracing all parts of ourselves, including the uncomfortable ones. Imagine each addiction as a traffic signal pointing to a specific place within you. Compulsion isn't just a weakness of character, it's a guide, a marker of where the psychic work needs to be done. For instance, someone battling a shopping addiction might be trying to fill a sense of inadequacy or a need for external validation. Individuation requires us to look at these impulses with honesty and compassion, asking, "What am I truly searching for?" For Jung, freedom begins when we stop seeking externally for what can only be found within. He famously said, "He who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens." Instead of losing ourselves in fleeting pleasures, the journey of individuation invites us to explore our fears, desires, and contradictions, transforming them into sources of strength and wisdom. Another key to understanding addiction through a Jungian lens is exploring the role of archetypes, the universal patterns that inhabit the collective unconscious. Archetypes like the hero, the mother, the sage, and the shadow influence our behaviors in ways we don't always realize. Addictions are often tied to distorted archetypes. Take the rebel archetype, for example. When activated in a healthy way, it inspires us to question norms and seek authenticity. But when out of balance, it can drive us to challenge boundaries in self-destructive ways, such as through substance abuse or impulsive behaviors. Another example is the victim archetype. This archetype may surface when we use addictions to escape a sense of powerlessness or injustice. "I can't change my life, so I use this to forget," is a common narrative in such cases. Here, addiction acts as a way to avoid the responsibility of facing pain and the need for transformation. The solution, according to Jung, isn't to suppress these archetypes, but to work with them. When we recognize which archetype is guiding our behaviors, we can redirect it toward a higher purpose. The rebel can become a force for personal change. The victim can transform into the survivor, someone who finds strength in the face of adversity. Jung emphasized that many modern problems, including addictions, stem from spiritual disconnection. He observed that among all my patients over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a spiritual outlook on life. Indeed, for Jung, spirituality wasn't necessarily religious, but rather a connection to something greater than the ego, whether the self, nature, humanity, or even a transcendent sense of purpose. Addictions often arise as substitutes for spiritual experiences. They offer a glimpse of transcendence, the euphoria of alcohol, the ecstasy of drugs, the false connection of social media, but always leave a greater void than the one they intended to fill. Jung believed that only a genuine reconnection with the self could fill this void in a lasting way. This doesn't mean the path is easy. Spiritual reconnection requires courage, patience, and a willingness to face the pain that addictions attempt to mask. But in seeking this connection, we discover something no fleeting pleasure can provide: a sense of meaning. Understanding the roots of addiction is a crucial step, but how do we turn this understanding into action? Jung believed that the practical work of the psyche involved both consciously exploring the unconscious and integrating its contents into daily life. This process is challenging but transformative and can be approached in several ways. The first step is to let go of the idea that addiction is merely a problem of self-control or morality. It is a symptom of something deeper, a sign that something in your psyche is demanding attention. This requires an honest look at your life. Ask yourself, what am I trying to avoid or fill with this behavior? This simple yet powerful act begins to build awareness of the internal forces driving the cycle. Facing the shadow is no easy task, but it is essential. Working with a therapist or guide familiar with Jungian concepts can be incredibly helpful. The practice involves bringing to light what has been repressed: fears, resentments, desires, or traumas. The key is not to judge these parts of yourself, but to recognize them as legitimate aspects of your human experience. As Jung said, "He who looks inside awakens," For instance, someone addicted to social media might discover that the compulsion stems from a deep fear of loneliness or social inadequacy. Recognizing this doesn't mean self-condemnation. It means using this understanding to transform the behavior. Often, addictions arise because we suppress legitimate needs for expression. The process of individuation requires finding healthy ways to channel this energy. Creative activities like writing, painting, dancing, or sports can provide a space for repressed impulses to manifest without self-destruction. For example, an alcohol addiction might be tied to a need for relaxation or connection. Instead of seeking that experience in the substance, a healthier alternative could be cultivating deeper relationships or exploring practices like meditation and yoga. Jung emphasized that true healing doesn't occur on a superficial level, but through connection with the self, the essential core of who we are. This can be cultivated through practices that foster introspection and a sense of transcendence, such as meditation, time spent in nature, or exploring texts and symbols that resonate with you. For Jung, spirituality wasn't dogmatic, but a deeply personal experience. He suggested that universal symbols, like mandalas, could help individuals connect with their inner wholeness. The practice of creating or contemplating these symbols can provide insights and balance to the psyche. Overcoming addiction is rarely a solitary journey. Jung believed the human psyche is inherently relational. Finding a support group or individuals with whom you can share your struggles without fear of judgment is vital. This human connection reinforces the understanding that you're not alone in your journey. Transforming an ingrained pattern like addiction requires patience. Jung often cautioned against rushing psychological work. Transformation isn't an event, but an unfolding process of awareness. Addiction often functions as a vicious cycle where relapses can occur. In those moments, it's important to remember that progress isn't linear. Every small step, like identifying a trigger or resisting an impulse even once, is a victory. The practice of self-acceptance is also crucial. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This means that even relapses or failures are opportunities for learning. It's not about completely eradicating addiction, but developing a conscious relationship with it so that it no longer has the power to dominate your life. Though often seen as enemies to be defeated, addictions can be relentless teachers, revealing the depths of our own psyche. For Carl Jung, the difficulties we face, including repetitive and self-destructive patterns, are in fact invitations for growth and transformation. He believed that what challenges us most, paradoxically, holds the greatest potential for our evolution. Addictions show us where we are disconnected from ourselves. They highlight unhealed wounds, unmet desires, and abandoned dreams. When we approach our addictions with honesty and compassion, we begin to uncover what's truly at stake. For example, an addiction to external validation might point to a childhood wound of rejection. A work addiction might reveal an endless search for meaning in a world that values productivity over being. But beyond exposing our wounds, addictions also reveal our hidden strengths. They indicate where our vital energy resides, even if poorly channeled. Jung often argued that the same drive leading someone to addiction could, when redirected, become a powerful creative and transformative force. For instance, the emotional intensity fueling a drug addiction might be the same energy that, when harnessed, enables profound connections to art, spirituality, or human relationships. The journey to overcoming addiction is not about eliminating aspects of ourselves, but integrating them. Jung viewed the psyche as a whole, encompassing both light and darkness, virtues and flaws. For him, the goal wasn't to become perfect but complete. This acceptance is perhaps the greatest challenge. We live in a society that teaches us to hide our weaknesses and glorify our successes, yet addiction is the psyche's way of reminding us that what is repressed doesn't disappear. It returns, often in destructive forms. To truly free ourselves from addiction, we must embrace our vulnerability and recognize that we are both fragile and powerful at the same time. Accepting our wholeness means acknowledging that addictions are part of our story, but do not have to define our future. It's understanding that we are greater than any destructive pattern and that the journey to healing is ultimately a journey toward authenticity. Overcoming addiction is not just about abandoning a behavior, it's a process of rebirth. Jung believed that when we confront the darkest aspects of ourselves, we have the opportunity to emerge as more whole individuals, deeply connected to the self and the world around us. This rebirth often involves rediscovering a sense of purpose. Addictions frequently arise when we lose our sense of direction, when we disconnect from what gives our life meaning. The journey of healing invites us to explore fundamental questions. What inspires me? How can I contribute to the world? What does it mean to live authentically? By finding answers to these questions, we begin to fill the void that addictions once occupied. This purpose doesn't have to be grand. It can be as simple as nurturing meaningful relationships, dedicating yourself to a passion, or living with greater presence and gratitude. Jung said, "There is no consciousness without pain." Overcoming addiction is a painful process, but it is profoundly liberating. It is an opportunity to step out of autopilot and take control of your own narrative. By confronting addictions with honesty, courage, and compassion, you not only break free from the patterns that hold you back, but also discover a path to a more authentic and meaningful life. It's not about erasing the past, but transforming it into a stepping stone for growth. Remember, addiction does not define who you are. It is just a part of your story, one that can be transformed as you learn to embrace the full complexity of what it means to be human. On the journey of individuation, every step toward integration is a step toward freedom and the realization that true healing has always been within you. If you resonated with the themes in this video and want to dive deeper into self-discovery and psychology, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and leave a comment sharing your experiences or reflections. Your participation is crucial for us to continue bringing meaningful and transformative content. And don't miss the videos appearing on the end screen. They could be exactly the next step in your journey. See you in the next video.